Oh, and I did a night at the Roxbury with.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
The green rush is real. From lawmakers and investment bankers to CEOs and investors, we'll look at how people are transforming cannabis from the shadows of the black market into a cash crop that draws in cannapreneurs from Hollywood to Wall Street. Here to help you navigate the business of cannabis, please welcome Louis Goldberg and Ann Donahoe. Brought to you by KCSA Strategic Communications.
I'm Ann Donahoe along with Louis Goldberg, and today we're going to be talking to Debra Borchardt, who is the co-founder, CEO, and editor-in-chief of the Green Market Report, which is a new cannabis financial news site. And she also is a contributing editor at Forbes. So welcome to the show, Deb. Debra, Deb,
Thanks
which
for
do you
having
prefer?
Either way, I'm easy.
So when was the moment in your life? I mean, you've covered financial services for years, right? When did you realize that the cannabis industry was not only worthy of coverage, but worthy of taking a leap of faith into?
Well, I started covering it when I had heard of an outdoor festival in Colorado, and one of the beer companies, I think it was Budweiser, was a sponsor. And I thought, okay, mainstream, getting involved. This is something serious. This was probably back in 2013, 2012 in that area.
And was this for Forbes that you started covering it, or was it for another outlet?
I was at thestreet.com. I was at thestreet.com. And that's when I really started my coverage. I got very interested in these shady pot stocks, and I felt that as a financial journalist, it was really important for me to expose these shady players for investors out there. And that really got me very interested into the area. And like most regular media rooms at that time, thought, well, you know what? That's interesting for a story here and there, but that's it. There's no more news here.
So how did you convince your editor to allow you to do this regularly as opposed to a one-off?
I convinced them that I could do this regular coverage and still get all my work done.
So that was your side gig.
I had financial market coverage that I had to do, and there were several deliverables each day I had to do, and honestly, the Street gave me a lot of freedom. But I started doing a daily Marijuana Minute video, it was called The Daily Hit, and it would just be about a minute long, right? And people loved it. And so that was my coverage there. I actually got hired away from them to work at a financial newsletter, and they wanted me to cover cannabis, and then I ended up at Forbes after that. So I've kind of just been able to continue covering the space for a while.
So Forbes is such a stodgy, historic business publication. Were they into it the same way that the Street was? I mean, the Street's much more scrappy. It's the Jim Cramer vehicle, booyah. Forbes is Malcolm Forbes and Steve Forbes, who ran for president, and when you went there, what was their take on your coverage of cannabis?
Well, it was interesting when I started talking to them about writing with them. We talked about different beats. And I was coming out of Women's Wear Daily, and I've been doing a lot of fashion and retail reporting with them. And I said, I can do fashion and retail with you. And they were like, oh, that's good. We don't really have anyone doing that. And they said, oh, you've written a lot about cannabis. We don't have anyone doing that. And I said, all right, well, I can keep doing that. And quite honestly, the retail stories have started to just lose interest among readers. They're just not, just like they're not interested in buying stuff at retail. They're not interested in reading about it anymore.
Right.
But the interest in the cannabis is humongous, and so I have a lot of readership there. So that's why I've really kind of shifted away, and I do less retail reporting now and almost all cannabis.
Do you see a difference in the way you cover pot versus the way you've covered fashion, retail, and other financial stories?
That's a really great question, because in the one sense, no, because I wanted to, and that's what I think has separated my cannabis reporting from other people, is I approach it as I would approach any other company I've written about and give it the same attention to detail and the same seriousness of the subject matter. Whereas I felt like a lot of other reporters were maybe cub reporters. They do one-offs here and there. So there was a lot of giggly marijuana puns in the headlines,
Right.
marijuana puns in the first
The
couple
standards
of
seem different at some publications.
There was too much giggle factor, and I
Mhm.
just thought that was just not the way I would approach it. I saw this as serious emerging industry, and that was what I gave it in my reporting, was that, serious attention. And I thought that was what made the difference.
Are you seeing the management
definitely
teams change as well? I mean, the first participants, whether they were public or private, came out of the black market. Are you seeing a change in who is running these companies?
There's definitely a shift to more mainstream executives coming into the industry. Absolutely. And I think that has changed a lot. Another thing with when I was early on reporting these businesses, if someone pitched me a story, I would have to go and double check what they had told me. As a reporter, I mean, you kind of hope when someone pitches you something that they're telling you the truth, you would think, and it would come out that it wasn't. And so it was a lot of extra work to verify that the things I was being told were the truth. What we're getting now, because we're getting more seasoned CEOs, more seasoned investor relations people, is now more of the stories that are coming out from these companies are a little bit more truthful in nature.
Are you finding the investment community starting to shift too? With who, from a retail investor versus a family office, are they getting more serious? Which probably isn't the right word, because retail investors are serious,
No.
But I think you know what I mean. Yeah.
I totally know what you mean. We did start to see a shift right before the election. And then when Trump got elected and Sessions got made AG, we saw a lot of the investment money that was coming in go out. Now what we're seeing is a lot of interest from family offices. We might not necessarily see the money from the family office, but you're seeing a lot of money coming in from the founders and the owners of these family offices. So that they're putting their personal money to work.
We're actually seeing the same thing. I mean, we represent a lot of public cannabis companies, and we're taking the CEOs on non-deal roadshows to hedge funds and private equity firms, and they're not able to invest their LP money. They're the people who have given them money to manage, but the partners are writing checks, and they're writing $500,000 checks like it's nothing because they believe in the industry.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
They want in.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I'm interested in is your perspective, because you've been covering the financial markets for a long time. Has cannabis been a boon to the over-the-counter market, because these companies are not allowed to list right now on the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange? Has it added legitimacy to the OTC, in your opinion?
I think it has and it hasn't, because you would probably agree maybe half to 75% of those cannabis stocks on the OTC are pretty shady. They're pretty dodgy.
For sure.
And
not our clients.
Right. And that definitely puts a stain on things when you have so many of these shady companies, which of course the OTC doesn't police.
Yep.
And nor do they don't necessarily police them unless they don't put their filings in, and then all of a sudden they're gray market or they're skull and crossbones.
Yeah.
There are a handful of stocks on the NYSE and the NASDAQ. I heard actually something really interesting when I was on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange just a few weeks ago, that someone told me. They said, I think one of the big pushers behind rescheduling and legalizing cannabis is going to come from behind the scenes of the banks, the Goldman Sachs and such, because they feel like they're missing out on all this IPO money.
Wow.
And I was like, really?
Yeah, I mean, if you
really?
look,
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that. And
think about it. MedRelief, which listed a couple months ago up in Canada on the Toronto Stock Exchange, raised $100 million. That's a legit IPO. And it was led by Canaccord and Cowen, both two legitimate, they're not bulge bracket banks, but they're legitimate banks. So, I think you're right. I think you're spot on that the investment banks and the exchanges are going to push harder than anybody else to change the regulatory environment.
Well, and if anybody's going to listen,
I think
Congress will listen to them, right?
Yeah. Well, they could. I mean, look, the administration right now has so many Goldman Sachs people in it that they very well could. The exchanges the NASDAQ and the NYSE they do not want to touch it as long as it's federally illegal. Now, they do have a few companies that have jumped in, and I have asked them multiple times, what are you going to do about these companies? And so far, they just won't talk to me about it. They won't go on the record. They just keep saying, look at our listing requirements. And I'm like, come on.
Right.
Yeah.
Just talk to me.
Okay, so this is a great time to take a break. And when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Debra.
More Green Rush coming up after we roll through our sponsors.
Are you disturbed by the prescription medication commercials on television and their endless list of side effects? They go on, and you end up having to take multiple pills to counteract the problems caused by the first pill. It never ends. Have you looked into CBD as a more natural option? At Saturn Ranch, we produce all-natural CBD topicals and THC-infused edibles. Premium lab-tested hemp-derived CBD is the most important ingredient in our products. From topical balms, salt scrubs, bath-soaking salts to tinctures and edibles, you're sure to find something to help. Family-owned and operated, we at Saturn Ranch believe in and use our products daily. Don't put anything on your body that you wouldn't put in your body. SaturnRanch.com.
Strainwise Consulting is the most sought-after consulting company for cannabis business applications and management contracts. We consulted on the first recreational license in the world and have had an over 95% success rate on applications submitted. The industry is growing at such an exponential rate that building a powerful and lasting cannabis business is a number one priority. Here's Strainwise's Sean Eubanks.
In our first 5 years, we branded and supported 9 medical and recreational marijuana dispensaries and approximately 160,000 square feet of sophisticated and efficient product cultivation.
Strainwise Consulting has the experience and expertise to guide you through the process.
The next generation of vaporizers has arrived. Vuber vaporizers are blazing the way with unparalleled technology for oil, concentrate, or dry flower pens. Providing unsurpassed customer service and expert craftsmanship, Vuber vaporizers use cutting-edge technology, providing a power-packed, smoother vapor with a lifetime guarantee. Experience vaporizing the way it was meant to be. The Vuber way.
Banking and Buzz, understanding the business of cannabis. Welcome back to The Green Rush, only on CannabisRadio.com.
So we are back with Debra Borchardt, the founder of Green Market Media and columnist for Forbes. And we were just talking about the nature of the stock exchanges and how public cannabis companies trade. The most high-profile effort over the last 6 months or so was High Times trying to list on the NASDAQ. Can you tell us about what your coverage of that was and what you think is happening?
So here's the latest on that. So they did, as you know, kind of a backdoor reverse merger. If I can't go in the front door and do a normal IPO with NASDAQ, I'll go buy a shell company that's listed with NASDAQ, and then I'll get my stock on there, and they won't notice, will they? Well, yeah, they noticed, and they didn't like it. And so now what they're trying to do is kick them out. And they keep appealing. The last appeal they were supposed to stop trading and get delisted a few weeks ago. And September 12th, I believe, was the day. And they're still there. So I called up NASDAQ and I said, so what gives? They were supposed to be delisted. They're still trading. They appealed, obviously. What's the status of the appeal? And they wouldn't comment. So I know they're trying to get rid of them. They're saying, oh, well, they don't have 300 shareholders, and that's in our listing requirements. You knew that they were going to find something in those listing requirements to kick them out. And that's where they're at right now, is they're trying to get rid of them.
So do you think that somebody's going to figure it out? I mean, whether it be another company that doesn't touch the plant is going to be able to figure out how to backdoor their way or even come in the front door to one of these exchanges?
Well, the same thing's happening over at the New York Stock Exchange. They have a company, and I spoke to them about it and said the same thing. Like, you have your REIT that, in Innovative Industrial Properties, IIPR, and you're letting them in. What about these other companies? And they're doing the same thing as NASDAQ. They just don't want to touch anything along those lines. And yet they have certain policies and procedures that they go through where the company gets to keep appealing those decisions. So it gets dragged out for a really long time.
So is there anybody in this industry that you follow that you think is really smart, that people should be paying attention to, whether they be analysts, they're market participants or CEOs,
other reporters,
other reporters, anybody who you say they get it?
It's funny. There's a few people that I do follow. I do Rockstein, the 420 Investor.
Mm-hmm.
Alan does some really great analytical work on some of the companies. He's a little bearish, but I think when you look at some of the work he does, some of these items, he really digs deep and does a lot of diving down to get some really great information. I think he does some of the best analytical work out there. And he's definitely someone I follow. I like to follow Tom Angle of Marijuana Moment. Tom has his finger on the pulse of the politics. Mm-hmm. Now, my website, Green Market Report, doesn't really get into politics. We strictly stay with financial. But I do like to see what Tom says because he seems to really have his finger on the pulse of D.C. And I think that's also super important to just know what's going on there. So I would say those two guys I follow quite a bit.
So talk about your website, and talk about it both from so that the listeners can understand what it is and what the value they'd get out of it, and then also talk about the entrepreneurial side of it, because you have taken a tremendous leap of faith in starting a company in the cannabis industry. So I'd love to hear both sides of that.
Sure. So as I was doing my work and reporting, one of the things that I felt was an opportunity and a gaping hole was financial news coverage for cannabis. What I felt that was out there was there were some sites out there like MJ Biz Daily, and I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, but I'm just showing that I felt like there were some opportunities here because I looked at their stuff and I was like, wow, they're very comprehensive. There's almost every time something happens, they cover it. But it wasn't a very deep coverage. It was maybe 300 words. They were in and out. So I didn't get a lot out of it. And then I found other sites that, here's some business news, but they're making me sign up for stock tips, or now they want money because they want more money in their investment fund. I felt like they wanted something. There was an angle. They wanted me to buy their stock tips or whatever. So I felt that there just wasn't a cannabis news website.
Stock tips for the shady companies that
pot stocks,
stocks that most people think are questionable.
Right. So I felt like there was an opportunity to create a news website that was, as I call it, the CNBC of cannabis. So it's the financial news, it's giving it serious coverage, and we're not trying to sell you stock tips, and we're not trying to get you to put money in our investment fund. And we kind of want to be that Switzerland and the neutral zone of all these private equity people, so that we're not just pushing. Some of these news sites are just owned by private equity people that are just using the news site to promote the companies they've invested in. And that's what prompted me to start the website. So as far as the entrepreneurship of it, it's interesting because I'm sure a lot of the entrepreneurs can relate to this. And trust me, this is out of my comfort zone. I'm one of those people that always like to just clock in, clock out, get my check, and go home. So doing this is very much out of my comfort zone. Having said that, it was super exciting and inspiring to plan it, to get it ready, to build it. Very exciting when it was launched, when you push that button and it's live, and you're like, oh my God, this is great. And then
has it broken yet?
Launch.
Has the site broken?
No.
Oh, you're lucky.
No. We have a great web designer, right? We have a great IT guy, so we were very smart to do that. And, and then we followed it up. We had a viral study. That was amazing and exciting. We were written up in multiple different countries as well as America, so that was super exciting. And then you kind of have days where it's just overwhelming, where you think, what have I taken on? This is so much harder and so much more work than I thought. And that's been tough because I'm building a business, but at the same time, I still have to make a living. And lucky for me, I did save a lot of money over the years, so I've been living off of some savings. But I'm also like,
was that from
still
investing in
trying to
those
juggle.
shady pot stocks?
That was from working on Wall Street for probably close to 15 to 20 years. So when you work on Wall Street, you don't get a lot of job satisfaction, but you do get a pretty fat bank account. And that's another thing that I bring to my reporting is I have a Wall Street background, so I approach it with a Wall Street point of view.
Well, I also read somewhere that you have an acting background too.
I do.
I heard a rumor that you are on As the World Turns and SNL. Can you confirm or deny?
I can confirm that. I did three Saturday Night Live episodes as an extra. I did it back in the days of Andy Samberg and Chris Farley.
So that was the Dick in the Box years.
Yeah. You know, I did one of those scenes. I did one of those night at the, and I did a Night at the Roxbury with Chris Kattan and
oh my God.
So did they hump your leg?
Yeah. They came up bouncing around. We were the girls at the bar, and they came up bouncing around us, and we went ugh, and we like push them away and like make them go away because we won't dance with them. And
Nick,
you know,
you have to find the
Ferrell
link to
and
this to put into the show notes. We definitely need the link. There's got to be a YouTube link to this somewhere so that we can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, and I did, and that was also the one that Night at the Roxbury was an episode with Alec Baldwin, and Alec Baldwin did one of those cold opens where he did a musical number where he walks through the whole set and the whole floor at 30 Rock, and he was just amazing to watch in person, and he's an amazing talent. So it was a great experience. I thoroughly loved each time I was there.
Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, more with Deb.
More Green Rush coming up after we roll through our sponsors.
Cannabis concentrates have been around for hundreds of centuries. In 19th century America, extracts mixed with other herbs were sold as a miracle cure. Now, Apex Supercritical has elevated the science of extraction into the 21st century. Apex Supercritical is the leader in CO2 extraction, which is the cleanest, safest, and purest way to extract plant oils. ROI in as little as 3 weeks. Our cost-effective systems are fully automated with an industry-leading 3-year warranty. And if we don't have your system in stock, we can build one in as little as 4 weeks, bringing CO2 extraction to the masses. Learn more at apexsupercritical.com. 4-week build excludes high production systems.
Running a successful cannabis business isn't easy. Successful businesses need to have strong people to achieve long-term results. At Live Advisors, we believe people are the heart of business, and training people can help you infinitely grow your business. Learn more about our offerings at liveadvisors.com.
Hi, I'm Montel Williams. Most of you know me as a talk show host, but I'm also an author, actor, single father of 4, avid snowboarder, and I'm also a medical marijuana patient. Living with multiple sclerosis, I'm in pain every day. Medical marijuana is my last resort, and it helps me when all other drugs have failed. If you'd like more information about medical marijuana, you can contact the Marijuana Policy Project at mpp.org or call 1-877-JOIN-MPP.
Banking and Buds, understanding the business of cannabis. Welcome back to The Green Rush, only on CannabisRadio.com.
All right, thanks for coming back. Deb is now going to talk to us about something completely different. So we've talked in the past about getting samples in the mail. And historically, or not historically, you're not supposed to get medicated samples in the mail. Correct. Do you actually get medicated samples, and how do you deal with that?
Yes, people do send me stuff. You know, it's funny. It's like it just sits on my desk, and it's just kind of funny. It's just kind of sitting there on my desk, and it's like whatever. I don't even think that much about it. Like I said, I did a lot of retail reporting, so I would often get shoes in the mail and things like that. So I also have, you know, multiple pairs of shoes and multiple pairs or bags. And so it's just kind of, to me, it's as a reporter, it's just like, oh, okay, well, here's some other vendors' products.
Yeah, but you work out of your home now, right? And you have kids. So if they walk in and see the samples, are they asking to try? How do they react to seeing, cannabis plainly displayed in your house?
Yeah, I have an 18-year-old son, and you would think that he would be very interested in it, or that I would have to watch to see if any disappeared. And he's shown very little interest in it, actually. So, I mean, we talked about it. He knows what Mom does. And I kind of just said, well, when I covered robotics for this newsletter, I didn't go out in the garage and build a robot. And, when I've covered, fashion design, I didn't go out and try to start my own fashion company. It's another subject to cover. And that's kind of how he's seen it, is, it's just another thing that Mom's writing about now. Like, all right, whatever. It's not been, we've talked about it, if anything, a lot from the medical aspect and the kids that it's helped medically. I have told him, the one study that is negative about marijuana is that it is not good for developing brains. And I said, if you want to do this, you need to wait until you're 21 and don't even touch it until then, because it's just not good for your brain.
And in the and once he hits 21, you're going to get him just bejizzled.
I don't know about that. Maybe I'll have a drink with him, but I don't know if I don't think I'm that parent.
So, Deb, we do a segment here called Puff, Puff, Pass. And here we ask guests to tell us, usually it's 2 things they love about the industry and 1 thing they hate. But because you're a reporter, we're going to change it up a bit and ask you to talk about the 2 things you love covering in the industry and the 1 thing you hate covering in this industry.
I love covering the small business stories. I mean, to me, that's the backbone of our economy. And I just love a good entrepreneurial story of someone that started a business, they're growing it. I find those stories very inspiring. So I love those.
Can you give one, just, I know I'm cutting in, but a quick example of somebody who you think is like really inspirational?
I wouldn't say any one particular person, but I think like the Open Vape company, they're doing over $100 million in sales. Wow. And this is a company that was basically is a private company still. And it was basically started with 3 founders. And they're still there working at the company. And I just find that amazing that this company has grown to be this behemoth. To me, that's an inspiring story. I'm also inspired by some of the Humboldt County farms and what they're doing and how they're, hanging tough with each other. I find those stories really inspiring too. And as far as what I don't like to cover,
shady stocks.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you have to talk negatively about a company, but you're basically putting up the information that they've made public. And you're saying, okay, this company doesn't make any money. They're valued at $20 million. The wife is the president. The husband's the vice president. They've given each other stock, blah, blah, blah. And then they come after you and get mad at you and attack you. And that's the unfortunate part of this business is when you cover that some of these people get very, very angry with you. And you're going, I'm not telling anything that isn't the truth. I'm not making something up.
And it's not personal.
From your own filings.
Yeah.
Most of this is your own filings. You made this public. Why are you shooting the messenger? So that's been the only negative thing about this industry is people can be very passionate, and especially the advocates, and which is kind of interesting. But the advocates sometimes, even if you say something negative about a company that's kind of shady, they'll get crazy about it and get really angry with you, like you're talking down about marijuana. And it's like, no.
Is there, for investors, for any of the investors that are listening in, is there something specific that you can tell them to look at, either in the way that the company is communicating or in their filings, that is a clear red flag? I have lots of people that ask me all the time, which stocks should I buy? And I never I never say any individual stocks, but is there something that people should be clearly on the lookout so that they don't get screwed?
Yeah. So my first thing I do is I look at, a lot of people get fooled by looking at market cap. What you have to do is, to me, is look at revenues. See if there's any money coming in. You'd be surprised how some of these companies have very high valuations in the millions and millions of dollars, and they have no money coming in. Just none. No money coming in. And to me, that's what you have to look at. Is there any revenue? Are there any sales? Is there any profit? Is there any chance of a profit coming up? That's the thing. You may be an emerging biotech company where you have a great potential drug, but is there any money coming in? And that's, to me, is always the red flag, when there is no money coming in, but it's got a super high valuation. And then you start to look at some of the transactions between people that are, paying bills with giving people stock. Like, oh, we paid our lawyer with 20,000 shares of stock. Like,
they try and pay us that way.
You don't have money for a lawyer. Yeah, you don't have money for a lawyer. Okay, well, that's not good.
No, we don't. It's funny. We a lot of these companies will come to us and say, hey, we're going to pay you X amount of money. And we get down to the contract and it's all in stock. I'm like, no, we're not going to work for you. If you can't pay us in cash, because I can't spend your stock, and neither can you, honestly. Yeah. So.
Or themselves, their brother, their cousin, they're all consultants for the company, and they're all getting paid money. And then every time they issue more stock, there's another bonus for the consultant. Like, okay.
Yep.
That's not good.
So I think that wraps it up. Thank you so much, Debra. Again, Debra Borchardt is from the Green Market and can be found tweeting at Wall and Board. That's at WALL. I'm sorry. Wall and Broad. Yeah. As it sounds, Wall and Broad. And at Green Market RPT. Did I get that one right, Deb?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So special thanks for joining us, and thanks to Nick Opich for helping us produce this podcast. If you want to chat with us, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter with the handle @GreenRushComs, as well as at greenrush@kcsa.com if you want to drop us an email.
The opinions expressed on this CannabisRadio.com program are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of CannabisRadio.com. Any rebroadcast or redistribution without proper consent of CannabisRadio.com is prohibited.